today I'm going to introduce you to one of the most amazing men that I have ever met. Today you're going to get to meet Ron, who at the age of 69 decided that he was going to train to do an Ironman and raise money for the National Association of People Abused in Childhood. Now, for Ron, it was far less about the physical training and it was much more to do with a way to exercise his demons for the final time. So, in this very special episode of the Your Rich Life podcast, where we're talking about what is possible when you make decisions, Ron's going to tell you exactly why he made the decision to do the Ironman and what he got at the end of it. Ron, welcome to the Your Rich Life podcast. Thank you for being here today.
How you doing?
I'm doing very well. I'm very excited to share your story. So
Good.
I want to just remind people that what happened for you was that in September 2020, at the age of 69, you decided you were going to do an Ironman. Now, you didn't manage to get that done the following year because of COVID, but you did complete it in September 2022, and you raised money for the National Association of People Abused in Childhood. And I want to just go straight in to the question about what made you decide to do the Ironman for that charity.
It was historical, really. I was a victim of child abuse at an early age, from 6 to 12 years old, from a family member, a family friend, and I suffered all my life. I struggled with everything. I struggled with my sexuality. I struggled with my manhood. I actually then became alcoholic, a drunk, and then I discovered in my 20s fitness, and I then got into bare knuckle fighting. Everything I've always done has been to achieve, to relinquish the demons in my head. But I just actually, and I hadn't done it, and I was walking with friends a couple of years ago in '69. Very dear friend of mine, and I said, I'm going to do an Ironman, because I did Ironmans in my 30s. I was fifth in the world, and I always feel good. I've done 18 marathons. Everything I do physically, I always feel good with the endorphins, and it pushed back the demons, but the demons always came back into the forefront, and I was being controlled by the actual fella that abused me. I realised after many years he's still in control of me. Yeah. And at 70, I thought enough's enough. I'm coming to the latter part of my life, my twilight years, but I should be enjoying it. And this guy is still controlling me. So I decided that I was going to do an Ironman and extinguish him from my mind. And it worked. It worked fantastically, but it only worked because I had the drive in me to do it, and get up every morning and go and cycle, swim or run or whatever. It was slowly extinguishing that demonic flame that I had in my head.
I love
that. It is demonic. It is something that really, really does take control of you. It's almost satanic. It's only when you've been abused that people will actually appreciate what I'm saying.
Right.
It controls your every breath, your every thought.
I
through
know.
Your entire life.
I know. Before we got on the call, one of the things that you said was like, you mentioned that you'd taken drugs and you'd taken alcohol, obviously as a way to kind of like shut this noise up. But you also said that you got diagnosed with all kinds of things. Can you just talk to us a little bit about what other people were trying to tell you was experiencing?
Well, I became quite violent, and then they decided that I was in danger of becoming dangerous to the public, dangerous to myself, and take my life. And I became a crisis patient, and then I got into the system. The mental awareness system, but it's national health, and I was a crisis patient in the Medway Hospital, and they diagnosed me with bipolar, and they also diagnosed me with split personality, and they diagnosed me with many things, put me on a lot of drugs, and that wasn't my problem. My problem was the fact that I was carrying this burden of abuse all my life. And I struggled with relationships, and I struggled with everything to do with interaction with human beings. I struggled with. I couldn't have a man touch me. I'm quite happy now to cuddle men, but right up until I was 35, 40, I couldn't have a man in my space.
Wow.
It made me feel, it repulsed me, you know, and I laughed out. And so I got sections for a while because of my anger and my violence. I've been a bit of a lad in my time, but it was all driven by this demonic fear in my. It's almost like a fear in your mind that reoccurred over and over again. I had nightmares, and eventually, I just through fitness and the drive in me, I just rose above it. But when I was walking that day, I said to Mark, I can feel it's creeping back. I need to do something. And I got to say, the Iron Man not cured me, but it just distinguished that fire.
Yeah.
It just went.
And when just, I want to I'm really curious about, like, in that stage when people were telling you all these things that were wrong with you and you felt this anger and this rage, was there ever a part of you that knew that there was a different version of you, or did that feel like who you really were at the time?
No, what it was, I've had many psychiatrists and many therapists. I've had regression. I've been away to farms, like places where the tranquil retreats. I've had intensive therapy. I think the problem is no one knows the pain you're feeling, and they try to label it. They try to label the fact that you are like you are because of a medical or mental problem. The reason you're like you are is because you've been abused. That's it. Period. Yeah. You know, and what you've done, you've coped with it mentally and physically the best way you can. And you take these drugs because you think many people like me thought I'd done wrong, thought I created the problem, didn't have a support system. My parents didn't protect me. And you have this feeling of the innocence of child within you, you know, you protect it at all costs. So you become quite a strange person because you've got the child within that still cries, but in your mind, you've got the demon who's trying to get to the child. So you are in total turmoil all the time.
Wow.
That Iron Man made me, because the word Iron Man means something to me.
Yeah.
A man of iron, a man of steel, a man that can drive through anything. And I just drove through that memory, the absolute fear of that person and what he did to me. I drove through it and burnt it out.
Yeah.
Because what I'm saying to you now, prior to that Iron Man, I would have burst into tears.
Wow.
I'd be emotional. I would be a blubbering idiot because he still had control of my mind. He's got no control of me at all. I am the real me now because you create a persona.
Yeah.
You just create a persona that you know, Ron's all right. Ron's got it together, but Ron hasn't. Ron's destroyed, but he's gathered the bits together and he just bungles through life, you know.
I think that's the thing, isn't it? It's like, you know, even when people aren't struggling or haven't experienced what you've experienced, there's something about society that says, you know, it's weak and we can't talk about it and we just have to get on with it. But you know, your testament to the fact that, you know, you can carry this crap around with you for decades and you become somebody that you're not truly, as a way of, I mean, what you described there was like the inner child within still cries, but the demon's still trying to get it. I mean, that is a really powerful analogy for what you was feeling on that daily basis. And so I wanted, when you talked about then about, because one of the questions I wanted to ask you was, you know, when you decided to do the Ironman and you started your training, and first of all, were there any days when it was more if there were more days when it was more difficult to get up and go do it, how did you talk to yourself on those days to make sure you showed up for what you said you were going to do?
It's just purely mind over matter. But the thing is, Louise, I've been into fitness all my life, so I know the parameters of my body and I know how far I can go with it. And I do know the mind can destroy the body if you allow yourself to go too far. Because I have nearly destroyed myself over the years because of the abuse. The fitness has been something for me to channel that anger through. So I'm quite well aware of what I can and can't do.
Yeah.
I knew that all along that I could still do an Ironman at 70. I had that belief system in myself, because you got to remember that belief system has carried me through to the age I am now.
Yeah.
Because if I hadn't had some sort of belief system in myself or in my inner child, I would have died. I would have killed myself or destroyed myself.
Wow.
And this is the problem. And it's not just the abuse. I was mentally abused from the age of 6 months to 6 years old. I had a different name. My name was, I was born Ron Wood, but my parents had a row and I ended up in a fireplace, and I was taken away from my parents. My grandparents brought me up, and my name was Anthony O'Rourke. My grand was Irish. So that split personality came about because years later, my biological parents fought to get me back from my nan, who I thought was my mother.
Wow.
And I ended up with what I thought was my sister being told she's your mother.
Sheesh.
So at 6 years old, I'd spent 6 years with my grandmother. I think my grandma's my mother, with the name of Anthony O'Rourke, Tony, suddenly being told, no, that's not your name. You're Ron. I'm not your sister. I'm your mother, and I'm not your brother-in-law. I'm your dad.
Wow.
And oh, by the way, this is your brother. So I suddenly split that day that I had to walk back into my biological parents' house. And I truly believe to this day that they may have known about my abuse, because it was my dad's best friend.
Right.
So when I had my nervous breakdown at 40, I questioned my mum, but sadly my dad had passed, and my mum couldn't cope with it, And it's so deep, and we cannot go through the Pandora's box that you've opened today in 30 minutes. It's there's so many tentacles that grow from this,
Yeah.
and so many things go in different directions. But mentally, I am as stable as of any human being on this planet. But that has been self-taught. I've had so many therapists, psychiatrists, drugs, prescription drugs. None of them work. You have to do it yourself. You have to love yourself and protect your child. Anybody that's been abused will understand what I'm saying. You have to protect your inner child, because no one else did.
I mean,
and you lose the innocence of childhood.
I think you're right. I mean, we've only got about 30 minutes or so. But I just, obviously I knew you when you and I worked at the lake, and I was just so like, there was so much about your story. And one of the things that I loved about your story as well, which I want to touch on in a little bit, was how you showed up for your family in a completely different way when you started to share what had happened, and like watching you, with your boys and all that. It was just such a beautiful thing to witness, like the relationships that you were like, really putting energy into, and what became really, what was really important to you.
Yes,
and I think when you just sort of said there about, like, you have to do it for yourself, you have to protect your inner child, because the medication is not going to do it for you, and all of that kind of stuff. And you said something about, like, you have to love yourself enough. I mean, that's a really powerful statement to make when you're talking about all those things that you went through, but there was still a part of you that loved yourself enough to, like, almost keep making decisions to keep
you have to Louise, because if you don't, you end up loathing yourself. I mean, I loathed myself for many years. I blamed myself. I had a confusion with my sexuality at 18, because I didn't know. My toolkit wasn't given to me as a child.
Yeah.
My tool bag was empty, so I had to navigate sexuality with a distorted view.
Yeah.
With something that had been imposed on me that wasn't right. It was totally wrong, but I didn't know it. And the problem is that when they groom you in such a way, you actually end up believing that you're wrong, you're the cause of it, and you're guilty.
Yeah.
And that is a hell of a bag to drag for many years. So that I knew what he did was wrong. And I knew through all my years of boxing and cycling and running and everything I ever did, but I never quite got to where I wanted to be, because he would always appear. He would always appear in my mind. It was nightmares, and I'd go and see another psychiatrist, and they prescribe another drug, and then but as you get older, you become more experienced, and you know the proper right from wrong. Because what you don't know, when you lose that innocence of childhood, you lose the ability to know right from wrong sexually.
Right.
It is such a damning thing that they do to you, to take the innocence away from you. So you can't just grow up normal, and you have to grow up the best way that you can grow up. Some people don't. Some people kill themselves. Some people end up paedophiles.
Yeah.
The worst thing that ever happened to me, when Luke was born, I was under quite a lot of pressure. I was building a business. Luke's mum, we was rowing quite a lot, and she called in somebody to see me. I had to go and see these people, and they went behind my back to Julie and said, "Your son's in danger."
Wow.
Because the book says that most victims end up perpetrators.
Wow.
But that was a falsehood at the time. It was something that was being written about and discussed. It was the do-gooders who thought they knew the best, and once that's happened to you, you're ruined. No, you're not. Don't chuck me in the bin. And that's what he did. And it made me really angry that one person made that decision that my son was in danger because I'd been abused.
Wow.
That is so offensive.
Well, I mean, you've only got to look at the relationship you got with your boys now.
Yeah,
it's just gorgeous. And like I said, I do want to touch on that in a second, because I think what you've just talked about there as well is so true about how people get tarred with the same brush, about how everyone gets put in a certain box, and if this has happened to you, da da da. But you've constantly whilst you might have use different coping mechanisms that weren't helpful to you at the time, that's all you had available to you at the time.
That's always in my toolkit. I made my tools.
And so I wonder, with the exercise and all that, was that something that you knew that was always a way to channel for you, like it was a healthy way to channel rather than the drugs or rather than the alcohol?
It was the alcohol didn't last long. It was more the cocaine. I had a period of 6 months, and I was flat out on cocaine, and I woke up one morning and I thought, no, this is not for me. Mine was more violence. It was bare knuckle boxing, fighting gypsies, unlicensed fighting in London. It was more, I was doing stuff that I would be punishing myself.
Right.
So that I was fighting somebody that I had no way I was ever going to beat them all. Wow. But I just kept getting back in the. I went up to London and fought 8 gypsies, and it's just ludicrous what I was doing to my. It was like a self-harm. I did have a period of time in my teens where I cut the back of my hand with razor blades, and I understand why people self-abuse.
Yeah.
It's very difficult for people to understand why you're trying to hurt yourself. It's guilt. It's pure, utter guilt. And what you're doing, you're hurting yourself to punish yourself because you didn't stop what was happening to you. You didn't cry out no. Well, at 6 years old, and your dad's best friend, who's part of the family, you're not.
No, that's I mean, I've got no words for that, and I'm just so grateful that you're sharing this story, because one of the things that I want to share from this particular series is like that, what is possible, and
anything's possible, Louise.
Well, I mean, you're a testament to that.
Yeah. You've got to. It's very. People will listen to it and go, "Hang on a minute, that's not." It is as simple as that. You've got to find focus on yourself, love yourself, and believe that you was not wrong. That's what drove me. I knew that I was not wrong, and it was nothing to do with me. And until you get to that point, you're not going to go anywhere.
No.
You've got to believe in yourself. And that is a powerful belief.
Yeah.
Well, if you channel that into fitness or an Ironman, as it were, or London marathons, or whatever you want to do, you're a force. Yeah. You're a force to be reckoned with. But what I didn't ever do, I never came to terms with my abuser, the demon, the main demon, and I did that in the Ironman.
And so that's what I want to ask you. If you can, even if, I mean, I don't even know if you're going to be able to articulate it, but what was it about doing that day in, day out that created so much peace for you? Like, was you able to like let that go? Like, I'd love to know how you shifted that.
Well, to get up at 3 o'clock in the morning and go and cycle 75 miles and push yourself to the almost point of destruction, knowing that as you're doing this, you're squeezing that boil and releasing that pus from that demon. And that pain you're feeling in that physicality and that moment of pain climbing that hill out the saddle, you're squeezing that bastard out of your soul. That's how I felt. And I could swim and swim and swim, but that was my peaceful. The lake is swimming is my peaceful place. It's where I go to feel calm. Cycling and running became my place of not violence, but aggression. And I can push myself. And this is what I was saying earlier. But you have to be careful, because at 70, there's only so much my body will take. And because of my abuse, my mind is really sometimes, not now, but was sometimes scarily powerful.
Right.
They create almost a monster within you. And that's part of my demon that I had to expel.
Yeah.
And I sat all my children down many, many years ago and told them about my abuse. And it was the best thing I ever did, because they didn't really understand their dad. The way their dad couldn't hold a relationship down, the way their dad was up one minute, down the next. The way their dad was trying to, I bought one lorry and had 30 within 10 years, because I was just so intent on achieving and proving to the world that I'm normal and I can do this.
Yeah.
It's honestly, it's a burden. It's a burden I've carried. I met Louise 7 years ago, and she told me, stop with the labels. You're not bipolar. You're not this. You are you. And it was the best words that ever come out of anybody's mouth. That I know. I stopped seeing psychiatrists. I stopped seeing therapists. There's one person I see in Mason. His name's Marcus Niblett. He's my friend. He's been around for 20 years. And if I got any problems, I speak to him. But he said the greatest thing I did was what I did for myself, was the Ironman.
Yeah. I mean,
and I've got so much love for myself, so much love for my wife, so much love for my children. I knew on that journey leading up to that, Louise, that I was going to achieve what I set out to do. And it was just so inspiring for me as a person.
Well, I mean, when you do something like that, and like exactly that word Iron Man, I mean, it just conjures up
something. It
so
means
much.
Something.
It is.
It's like the S on your underpants, isn't it? It's like the shirt with the S on it. It's like, you become your own personal Superman, you know.
I hope somebody bought you S underpants for your birthday.
Yeah.
But no, you're absolutely right. And I mean, I just remember when I was working at the lake and watching you show up over and over again, and doing your training, and then the conversations that we used to have. And when you tell me that story about sitting your kids down, like, it makes me a bit emotional now, because
you have to, though.
Oh, I'm
because
crying
otherwise they become victims of your abuse.
Yeah. But I think it's such a brave thing, because one of the things we talked about again before we got on the call was that, and I hate the whole for somebody of your age, but there was so much less available to you back then. And being able to navigate your life and, go out and achieve what you did, because you did achieve great things, but you told me about what, how you'd sacrifice some of the relationships with your children and and to have I don't even want to say the guts, to have the love for your children to sit down and have that conversation and change the trajectory of all of your relationships. And then meeting your boys at the lake, and then watching you swim together. And it's just, what you did wasn't just about, what you showed was possible for you, but I really think you just changed everything for your family as well, because you showed up in that way.
There's a lot more to it. There's a word that people use now, that something's being projected. You're projecting something onto people.
Yeah.
What I did, I'm unaware of the word projection. What I did, I took the love for my inner child, my child within, and gave that to my children.
Ugh.
Because what happens is you put so much love in, it's such a protective feeling, because that child is the child that got abused, that's within you, and you're protecting it at all costs, and you're loving it with all the love in the world. And that, what that does, that thins down the love for the rest of the world, or your children, or your wives, or your relationships, because you're intent on keeping that child within safe. Once you come to terms with that, the child's happy, you become happy, then you can then project that love onto other people. And that's what I did. And I met the woman of my dreams. I got a good relationship with all my children. I reconnected with my son that I hadn't spoken to for 20 years.
Wow.
All because I loved myself, because I didn't. I loathed myself for many years. And I didn't like a lot of people. There's a handful of people, and one of them is Mark, one of the owners of the lake, has stuck with me through thick and thin, and always been my friend. And you need someone like that. You need someone you can turn to that understands you, and he did, and he helped me, and I will always be grateful to him.
Oh my God, that's just gorgeous. And I'd just like to, I mean, you've talked so much about, you know, turning that self-loathing to self-love, and, you know, having that deeper understanding of your inner child, and you know, not take what happened to you wasn't anything that you invited, and all of these kind of things. And you know, it might have been a long journey, but like, looking at what you've created for yourself now is amazing. And I think, you know, raising money for that charity, I'd love for you to just share, if there is anybody listening who had experienced what you have experienced, what would you want to say to them?
Love yourself, and remember that it was not your fault. This is the problem. When you get into your 60s and 70s, it'll always be then. And strangely enough, you can go through your 40s and 50s, and you're coping quite well. I think it's because you're busy. But once you hit your 60s and 70s, you've got a lot more time on your hands. If you retire, then it comes flooding back. You've got to just remember, it was never your fault. It wasn't what you wanted. You didn't invite that person into your life. You didn't invite that person into your mind. You definitely didn't invite that person to abuse you. All those things you doubt. You must not doubt. You must believe in yourself. And remember, once you've lost the innocence of childhood, excuse my French, you're fucked for the rest of your life, unless you do something about it. The innocence of childhood is everybody's right to be protected by their parents, and that's where the whole thing lies with me. I lost that right, and I don't know why I was not protected. But in them days, it just wasn't spoke about. Now it's a lot more out there. But people of my age, they've just got to believe in themselves and love their inner child and love themselves. And it's as simple as that, really. And it just takes a long time to get there.
Yeah, I love that. And I love that, you know, I think with all the conversations that we used to have, and for those people that are listening, obviously there isn't a visual. I just want to let you know that when Ron and I used to work at the lake together, and I used to say to people, go find Ron, and they say, what does he look like? I say, look for the scary one.
yeah.
But never a nicer person. And I say that just because of the tattoos and all that, and because you do look like a proper hard man. But I don't think I've met a softer soul in my life. And I think I like to think I'm somebody that looks for the good in the world, because there's a lot of people that want to go out there and talk about the bad. And I think the conversations that we had, and the way that you spoke about it, and the way that you took all of those learnings, and you came to that space, and you made that decision, and you did the Ironman, and you know, the fact that, not just the fact that you completed it, but the fact that what that gave you was this freedom from that demon, and, you know, give yourself some emotional freedom back, and just let you be your person. I mean, what a gift you gave yourself. I know it was hard to do what you did, and I admire you just
do you
for
know
doing
what?
that.
Do you know what, Louise? It wasn't, Louise. It wasn't hard. I enjoyed every moment of it. And the journey I took that day, it took me 15 hours of constant doing something, swimming, cycling, or running. And I was so joyous when I finished it, because I knew he'd gone.
I love that.
I knew he'd gone, and I knew he would never come back.
Yeah.
And I can talk about him. I can talk about. I have not welled up once talking to you. Prior to the Ironman, I'd have been in bits if I saw something come on television about child abuse. Gary Glitter recently, I would have been screaming at the screen recently about Gary Glitter being released. Yeah. Doesn't bother me. It does not bother me one bit because it's not my problem no more. Yeah. I've come to terms with my abuse, and my abuser has gone out of my mind.
I love it. I love it. Ron, you are an inspiration, and maybe you should write a book. Maybe that could be your next challenge.
Well, I'm funny enough, I am.
Yay!
I am, but I got to be careful because there was like a bit of criminality amongst all them years, and I got to be careful what I say in the book.
Ron, I don't believe you.
But yeah, no, that's the next thing. I'm actually in the throes of looking at that right now.
Good. I'm really, because I think there are so many layers to your story that offer people so much. I think so much possibility. Freedom, if if people have been in the position that you have, to know, the destructive ways that you dealt with it, all the medications and the labels you got given and and actually your freedom came from you making choices about what was the best way for you to do it, and then obviously speaking to your family and then meeting Louise, and all of these things come together to provide this freedom. And I think people need to read that, and you said, for you, it wasn't the physicality part of the Ironman wasn't the hardest stuff. It was like, when you described about when you was running and you were cycling, that's where you burst that boil. Very descriptive. Thank you for that. But like you can almost feel that was the way you just released it. And I just think it just gives people hope, I think. And I'm just very honored that you shared that story with me and with everybody else today.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome.
So, Ron, make sure that when you write your book, you let us know, and we'll get you back on, and we'll get you up on the bestsellers list.
I will do that. I will do.
Thank you, my darling. I'll speak to you again soon.
Take care.
Take care. Bye for now.
Bye. Bye.